Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. John Wisdom begins his essay, Gods, by talking about differences between theists and atheists. And it's a little bit misleading to frame it like that, because we could also say that given his frame of reference, he's drawing differences not just between theists and atheists in an abstract, general way, but also between different approaches that theists have taken in his present, which is, not quite 100 years ago, but quite a ways back in the early 20th century, and theists in the more distant past. So he begins by saying the existence of God is not an experimental issue in the way that it was. And he says, an atheist or agnostic might say to a theist, you still think there are spirits in the trees, nymphs in the streams, a God of the world. So that's referring to an older, let's say, form of theism, an older style. And Wisdom is going to clarify for us in the first two little subheadings of this the differences that he's not really being concerned with in this particular essay, in its main argument. And so one of these is the existence of gods as what we can call an experimental issue. Now, what is an experimental issue? Something that we can put to the test experimentally or experientially, right? We can, like the Russian cosmonauts who are up there in the, near space to the Earth, look around and say, I don't see any angels, I don't see any God. That would be making it an experimental issue, right? And obviously, you can say, well, God isn't the sort of thing that you're going to find looking out your space capsule's windows or by scanning the electromagnetic fields or something like that. So he goes on and he says, why would the atheist or agnostic be saying this to the theist? Well, he sees the theist in time of drought, pray for rain and make a sacrifice, and in the morning, look for rain. And he says disagreement about whether there are gods is less now of this experimental or betting sort than it used to be. And why is that the case? Well, because we understand the universe better. He says it's due in part, if not wholly, to our better knowledge of why things happen as they do. So instead of, praying to God to, open up the heavens, the firmament, and allow the rain to come down using an older cosmology, we might still pray to God and be like, can you redirect the weather patterns so that there'll be more moisture in the air, which then can condense and then rain on these crops that we need. But we've got a different cosmology in mind. And he says, it's true that even in these days, it's seldom that one who believes in God has no hopes or fears, which an atheist has not. Few believers now expect prayer to still the waves, but some think it makes a difference to people, and not merely in ways the atheist would admit. Of course, with people as opposed to waves and machines, one never knows what they won't do next. So expecting prayer to make a difference to them is not quite as definite a thing as believing in its mechanical efficacy, right? And so, he's saying you're not going to be like Elijah, contending with the priests of Baal on Mount Carmel. We don't really do that sort of thing today. So that's not a difference that we're overly concerned with. And then he brings up another one that I think a lot of contemporary theists might say does matter. And he says belief in gods is not merely a matter of expectation of a world to come. So someone might say, so here's a argument for the theist, the fact that the theist no more than an atheist expects prayer to bring down fire from heaven or cure the sick does not mean there's no difference between them as to the facts. It does not mean the theist has no expectations different from the atheist. What would those expectations be? Well, there's something more that the atheist doesn't believe in. Very often, those who believe in God believe in another world and believe that God is there and we shall go to that world when we die. And wisdom says, okay, sure, that's certainly the case that some people believe that, but I'm not interested in that. I don't want to consider expectations of what you're going to see and feel after death or what sort of reasons these logically unique expectations could have. So I want to consider, now, are there many of those theists who not believe in a future life? Or rather, so this is a little bit a better framework, I want to consider these differences between atheists and theists insofar as these differences are not a matter of belief in a future life. So you can believe in a future life, but I'm not interested in those differences. I'm interested in other differences. So here in the third section, he's going to bring up the example of a child and father. And I think you'll see the analogy quite easily and well. He's going to talk about this a bit more later on in the essay as well, or the article. And so he says, imagine a child who has a father. A child may wish to sit a while with his father. And he may, when he's done what his father dislikes, fear punishment, right? That's bad things. You did the wrong thing. And feel distress at causing vexation. So there's the negative side. You're going to get punished by dad. You feel bad for doing things that dad doesn't like. But on the other hand, you can also count on dad for help and sympathy, at least if your dad is a decent father, right? So he says he can feel sure of help when danger threatens and feel sympathy is there for him when disaster has come. Now, what happens when his dad dies? He's gone. He's off the scene. He no longer expects anything negative from his dad, no punishment, no longer expects any help from his dad. Does this mean that everything has gone away? He says, well, no. Maybe for a moment an old fear will come or a cry for help escape him. But he'll remember that, he's being very realistic, no help will come now, right? It's no good now. He may feel that his father is no more until somebody comes along and gives him an idea. Now this person comes along and says, well, your father is no longer here, but instead he exists in another realm, another world, another domain, and now this makes a difference again. Why? This person says, your father can see you, hear you. The child doesn't fear any punishment or expect any sign of his father, but he feels that his father sees him and will dread distressing him. And when he's done something wrong, he'll feel separated from his father until he's felt sorry for what he's done. And he may, in fact, look forward to another life where he's reunited with his father, like a man who expects to find a friend in a strange country where he's going. And then, what does wisdom say about this? Even when this is so, it is by no means all of what makes the difference between a child who believes that his father lives still in another world and one who does not. So it's not the total difference. What else can we add here? So he says, a person who believes in God would perhaps face death differently from a person who doesn't believe in God. Why? He says, we could describe this difference as belief in another world, only this belief is not a matter of expecting one thing rather than another hereafter. It is not a matter of a world to come, but a world that now is, though beyond our senses. And so once again, we see the difference not just between theist and atheist, but also between theist of the present and theist of the past, who might think, yeah, I go up into the sky and then I hang out with God and get reunited with all my loved ones. Whereas, a present-day theist who doesn't buy into that cosmology would say, well, there's a world to experience, but it's one that's already here. It's just not one that we can actually see, feel, hear, other things like that. And so you might say, okay, well, there's the vital difference. Now, it gets more complicated yet in ways that are quite interesting, because you could say, as the atheist, let's say the person arguing for the atheist, well, see, theists believe all sorts of crazy nonsense that they don't have any good reason for believing. The senses are, maybe not everything, but they're certainly very important. If you can't actually verify it or falsify it through the senses, then all that's just nonsense. You might recognize the logical positivists in statements like that. And they were, a quite important set of philosophers, at least in English language philosophy at the time. So what does wisdom do? He says, let's remind ourselves of something else. Philosophers believe in all sorts of things, not, in agreement with each other. He says, we're reminded of those other unseen worlds which some philosophers, and now he puts it in quotes, believe in, and others deny, while non-philosophers unconsciously, and again in quotes, accept them by using them as models. Models of what? By which to get the hang of the patterns and the flux of experience. There is no philosopher, there is no non-philosopher who doesn't believe in some things going beyond the senses, and as a matter of fact, in a whole bunch of things going beyond the senses. And he's not going to go into a lot of examples here, but he is going to tell you some of the general categories. So what are they? He says, we recall the timeless entities whose changeless connections we seek to represent in symbols, and the values that stand firm amidst our flickering satisfaction and remorse. And now we're going beyond just sort of metaphysical entities, or we might say moral entities. There's even physical things that we believe in, though we can't see or in other ways sense them. Physical things. You ever seen an atom? Well, you've seen models of them, right, in your chemistry or natural science classes. You ever seen an atom? No, of course you haven't. So, well, we've used electron microscopes. Well, what you've seen are images that are produced by doing certain things. You've never actually seen an atom, let alone an electron, let alone a quark, going further and further down the scale. But you believe in them, don't you? You don't have any trouble accepting that. The average scientist or philosopher or just ordinary person on the street believes in thousands of entities that they have never, ever experimentally or experientially encountered, right? Except through interpretation of what it is that's in front of them. So he says that, here we go. Physical things which, though not beyond the corruption of moth and rust, are more permanent than the shadows they throw upon the screen before our minds. So, when it comes to, let's call it morals and metaphysics, there's all sorts of things that we believe in. And we also believe in, if you don't like the word soul, you can use the word mind. Show me your mind. Let me take a look at it. Well, you can't. Can you even look at your own mind? I mean, if you're a Cartesian, you can be like, well, I think about things and I can sort of reflect on myself. Even Descartes is like, well, I can't reflect on my entire mind at once. I'm not the one being that could do that, presumably God, about which we know very little according to Descartes. So he talks about the hypothesis of mind of other human minds, and now we're going to extend it a little bit further. We think that human beings have minds. Animal minds. Do we think that animals actually do have minds? I mean, some people might draw distinctions. Well, I think that my dog and my kitty cat and the horse over there have minds, but the spider and the crab and let alone the oyster who just sits there sucking things in and out, making pearls. They don't have minds. They don't have consciousness. We don't know, right? Some people think they do. A lot of people think they do. And some people think that they don't. We can go further and talk about, he says, flowers and trees. Do they have minds? What about a world mind? Is that reasonable for like reasons? Someone who adjusts the blossom to the bees, someone whose presence may at times be felt in a garden at high summer in the hills when clouds are gathering, but not perhaps in a cholera epidemic. And that would be, a divine mind or something along those sorts of lines. We do often believe in all sorts of things. So now we're not, completely defining the difference between the theist and the atheist, which is what the goal of this entire article is, to unpack. But now we've got a good starting point for it. So that's the first 3 sections of this work by John Wisdom.